Hi boys and girls, in this video I'm going to be reading chapter 22 from History Book 4, Going Places. One thing leads to another. If you start making cloth, thousands of yards of it, you can't keep it all in New England. You have to send it to other markets. If your ships go to China and bring back fine goods, you can't keep all those goods in Salem or Boston. If you grow grain in New Jersey or forge iron in Pennsylvania or make guns in Connecticut, you need to find ways to get your products to people who want to buy them. If you live in the West, you want to send your grain, furs, and cattle to Eastern markets. How do you get your goods to market? How can you get cloth from Boston to Buffalo? In the first half of the 19th century, roads were no answer. Picture this: ruts, holes, mud, stones, and when you come to a river, no bridge. Now you have an idea of the roads. What was needed was modern transportation. Americans, who were becoming known all over the world for their ingenuity. I'm going to zoom in this a little bit. Americans who were becoming known all over the world for their ingenuity soon came up with some answers. They were canals, steamboats, railroads, and improved roads. Let's start with the new roads. Actually, they were pretty terrible, but in the 19th century they seemed exciting and much better than the existing roads, which were usually just dirt paths. Do you know what corduroy is? Well, it is a cotton cloth with ridges and valleys. Some roads were made of round logs and placed next to each other. They were called corduroy roads. And actually, you can kind of see a picture of what a corduroy road looks like right here at the bottom of page 110. Right down here is a corduroy road. What would it be like to ride on a corduroy road? Plank roads, made by placing flat wooden planks next to each other, were better, but not great. They quickly rotted away. Road building was a new science. No one knew how to build good roads, so they experimented. Often the new roads wore out or washed away as soon as they were built. Still, some very useful roads did get finished. The best were macadam roads, built with a new process developed in Scotland by a man named Macadam, using crushed stones and clay as a base over and asphalt or tar on top. About 1806, some people with big ideas decided we needed a road that would go across the country. Well, at least from the east coast to the Mississippi, which seemed to cross the country to most Easterners then. Remember, the Louisiana Purchase was made in 1803. Hardly anyone knew what was beyond St. Louis. That very long road was called the National Road, and it was to be paid for by the federal government. Does that sound like a good idea? Well, it didn't seem that way to everyone. It caused a whole lot of controversy. The people in the West wanted it. They really wanted it. But many Easterners said, why should our tax money go for a road out to that wilderness? In the South, people were shouting about states' rights. They didn't think the national government should pay for roads. If that happened, even states that the road didn't go anywhere near would have to pay for them. Let's go over to the next page. President James Monroe said it was unconstitutional, but finally the National Road was begun. By 1818, it stretched from Cumberland, Maryland to Wheeling in western Virginia. Then powerful Senator Henry Clay got involved. He wanted to see the road extended, and it was. By 1833, it went to Columbus, Ohio, and by 1850, it was at Vandalia in central Illinois. Trivia tip, boys and girls. Mr. Yates used to live in Wheeling in western Virginia, or West Virginia, and he lived right near the National Road. Just thought you'd need to know. Over its wilderness route, passengers squeezed shoulder to shoulder in hard-backed, leather-seated stagecoaches. There was a lot better than walking, which is what many did alongside their packed wagons. The road carried all kinds of traffic: mule carts heaped with farm produce, big horse-drawn vans stuffed with bales of southern cotton going to northern mills, northern factory products heading south, and wagon loads of immigrants, still speaking foreign tongues, bound west for destinations they could not even imagine. Before the National Road was built, it took 4 weeks to travel from Baltimore to St. Louis. On the road, if you traveled without stopping, you could make it in 4 days. One traveler, his name was Charles Fenno Hoffman, who went the whole way on horseback, wrote this: "It appears to have been originally construction of large round stones, thrown without much arrangement on the surface of the soil after the road was first leveled. These are now being plowed up, and a thin layer of broken stones is in many places spread over the renovated surface. It yields like snowdrift to the heavy wheels which traverse it. There is one feature, however, in this national work which is truly fine, and I allude to the massive stone bridges which form a part of it. So I guess he didn't really like the road. It sounded like it was kind of bumpy with all the rocks, but he did like the stone bridges. New roads made it easier for Americans to travel and to buy and sell goods. Some of the roads were built by private companies. The companies would put sharp sticks called pikes on a movable rod that blocked the entrance to the road. To get on the road, you had to pay a toll. The gatekeeper then turned the pikes. Roads were expensive to build and maintain. There had to be a better and cheaper way to move goods and people. Some people thought canals were the answer. Ben Franklin, back in 1772, wrote, "Canals are quiet and very manageable." George Washington believed that canals were the wave of the future. He invested in the Potomac Canal system near Washington, D.C., and in the Kanawha Canal. Investors thought canal would be like a major highway, taking goods and people from Virginia's James River across the Appalachian Mountains to the Ohio River. But the Kanawha Canal was never completed. In New York, DeWitt Clinton decided a canal could be built from Albany to Buffalo, which meant from the Hudson River to Lake Erie. It would be named the Erie Canal. Look at a map. That was to be some canal. Canal, by the way, is a big ditch. That's what some people call this one, Clinton's Ditch. Many people thought it crazy, and let me go to the next page here. Many people thought it a crazy project. It would cost a lot of money and would be very difficult to build. The Erie Canal would have to traverse 360 miles, most of it through the wilds of New York State. There were steep hills to climb. Boats would have to get over those hills. To raise the boats, locks would be needed. A lock is like an elevator for water and boats. When Thomas Jefferson heard of the project, he said to a canal booster, "Why, sir, you talk of making a canal of 350 miles through the wilderness. It is little short of madness to talk of it at this day." No question about it, it was a very ambitious project. But that didn't stop DeWitt Clinton, or the many Americans who wanted to build the canal. It was 1817 when they set to work. Thousands of laborers were needed. Ireland was having economic problems. People in Ireland were hungry. Canal workers got 50 cents a day and all the meat they could eat. That sounded good to many Irishmen, especially to those who just arrived in this country. It was planned that horses or mules would pull most of the boats on the Erie Canal. No, the animals didn't have to swim. Workers built a tow path next to the canal. Boats were attached to ropes and towed by the horses. Somehow it all got built. It was 4 feet deep and 40 feet wide. It was a man-made marvel. It was a man-made river. It was an engineering marvel. You could ride on a barge from the Atlantic Ocean up the Hudson River, across the Erie Canal, and onto the Great Lakes. On the canal, there were 83 locks to raise and lower you, your boat, and the water you were floating in. The canal was officially opened with a bang, actually a whole chain of bangs. First a canal was fired in Buffalo, and when that was heard down the canal, another was fired, and then another in Rochester, Syracuse, Rome, and Utica, until they heard the blast in Albany, where they just kept the cannons going on down the Hudson River. It took an hour and 20 minutes before the last cannon blasted in New York. Then, just for fun, they shot the cannons again, all the way back to Buffalo. They didn't call it the Big Ditch anymore. Now it was called the Grand Canal, and sometimes Clinton's Wonder. DeWitt Clinton, who was now Governor Clinton, took the first ride from Buffalo to New York City. It had taken 8 years to dig the Erie Canal. Clinton's trip took 9 days. Clinton's canal boat was called the Seneca Chief and carried a portrait of the governor in a Roman toga. The boat behind was called Noah's Ark. It carried 2 Indian boys, 2 deer, 2 eagles, and a lot of other twos. Another boat held 4 raccoons, 2 wolves, a fawn, and a fox. When Clinton got to New York City, he dumped a barrel of Lake Erie water into the Atlantic Ocean. Then there was a grand parade. Church bells rang and people cheered. Everyone could ride the canal. There were fancy passenger boats that served fine meals on linen tablecloths. There were flatboats with people, cargo, and animals jammed together. There were ordinary rafts. You could go on a slow boat at 2 miles an hour and pay a penny and a half a mile. Or you could whiz along at 4 miles an hour and pay about 5 cents a mile. Towns grew up all around the canal. It made life better for people. Before the canal was built, it cost $100 to ship a ton of grain from Buffalo to New York. By 1855, it only cost $8 on the Erie Canal. People packed their belongings and took the Erie Canal west. They moved to places like Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. They went east, too. The canal helped make New York the country's largest city. Before long, there was a canal frenzy throughout the nation. But no other canal was as successful or as long as the Erie Canal. Canal laborers sang as they worked. Soon everyone was singing a song called the Erie Canal, which you can see over here on the right side. Boys and girls, thanks for listening to Chapter 22. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.